My name is Jordan Weaver.
And I'm Lacey Weaver. Thanks so much for joining us. The first thing that we want you to do is to take out your phone and download this Shiloh Ranch Church app.
You're going to hear a lot of moving pieces, YouTube channel, 1017 Project. There's going to be a lot of things mentioned, but ultimately our goal is to start moving people towards biblical literacy, the gospel of Jesus, who he says he is in his word, what his word means, and what that means for us. And so with everything else that you're going to have going on around you, ultimately our goal would be that you understand Jesus on a deeper level based on what his word says.
We are in week 3. And I said last week, I begged you last week to be here. And if you're here, thank you for listening to that. I think that I'm going to keep pounding sort of the intention drum. Everybody that's here, whether it's live, whether it's digital, most will be digital for week 3, whether you're in Wickenburg, whether you're watching on a TV, whether you're watching on a screen, there's a reason for it. Why? Why are we here? Why are we attending? Why are we listening? Why are we tuning in? Why did we put whatever buttons were necessary? And so our hope would be this, is that we begin to ask God to show us more of himself from a better perspective. That's our intention. Our intention is if we can see Jesus better, it's like a light that the closer we get to Jesus, the more he begins to illuminate everything else. I mean, I think it's worth the effort, it's worth the input to get closer to Jesus and understand him better, because when we understand Jesus better, we understand life better. It's worth getting up in the mornings and coming to church and interacting with people and reading our Bible. It's worth the effort, because in the end, what we're gonna be left with is a much better result in our lives. I would say it this way, that every single aspect of our lives improves, and Jesus has a positive impact on every single aspect of our lives for eternity. See, that's so much better than even like today. Today, if somebody can do something that benefits me today, great. But it says that Jesus will have this impact on our lives, and it goes on from now into the next life, into eternity. And it's worth the effort. Just a clearer view of Jesus. It's kind of that same thought that you can't pick yourself up. You know, I come to church because I'm like, Jesus, you show me what I can't understand on my own. And I am confident, this is what me begging people to come to church this week was about, is that I'm confident this is gonna be one of those weeks. I know that it was for me. I know that what we're gonna go over for me was a life-changing sort of an understanding that I needed. So, Genesis chapter 15, we're gonna look at Abram before he becomes Abraham. God is setting a scaffolding. You know, if you're gonna build something, you set sort of the framework and then you build up around it. And that's sort of where God and Abram, God is going to build a scaffolding for us in our faith, and he's going to interact with Abram in a way that shows us God's intention for us. And so the story of Abram becoming Abraham, it says he's like the father of our faith. He was the lineage that would produce Jesus. And so what we're seeing is God interacting with man in a way that helps us understand God better. He's given Abram this promise. He's going to do amazing things in Abram's life. And Abram is having this moment with God. This is where it picks up in verse 4. It says, then the word of the Lord came to him, Abram. And Abram has said, I still don't have a son. He said, I'm going to give you a son. And Abram is telling God, like, God, it's been a minute. And I still don't. Is it going to be somewhere else? Do I need to get to work on this? God, do I need to get to work on helping you do these things in my life that we want to see accomplished? And God's saying no. He says, this man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and he said, look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said, so shall your offspring be. Verse 6, it says, Abram believed the Lord and he credited it to him as righteousness. So this sounds good so far. To this point, there's this moment where God says, I'm going to do amazing things with your life, better than you could have done with them. I'm going to do more with your life than you could have done with your own life. I don't know about you, but those are the sorts of things that you hope for. You hope that when God has this moment, he promises you, like, I'm going to do amazing things with your life, and you can look around and you go, well, I'm not sure how you're going to do that, but I want to believe that. And that's kind of what Abram is experiencing. God says, no, I really am going to do amazing things with your life. And Abram goes, I believe you. I want to believe you. It sounds great. He said, I am the Lord who brought you out of the Ur of Chaldeans to give you this land and take possession of it. Here is where Abram has this relatable moment. This is where I can listen to Abram and go, that sounds like something that I would say. It certainly sounds like something that I would feel. I would definitely feel what he's feeling because he says, sovereign Lord. So he's saying, Lord, you're amazing. You're powerful. I believe you when you say who you are, but this is us. This is all of us. Because you come to church and we go, oh, God wants amazing things for you. And you go, I want to believe that. He says, but Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? He says, I'm having this moment with you and it feels really good. But tomorrow when I'm by myself, how do I know? When I go to these places and they go, why is this your land? And what do I tell them? Well, God said so. Well, where's God now? This moment of doubt that says it feels good now, like I believe. I'm sitting in church with believers and I'm hearing these great things about God. And you go, this sounds great, but what about tomorrow when I go back to work and it seems like the same old life that I've been living? How will I know? How can I be assured? He's not saying I don't believe you. He's saying, how can I get to a place where I can believe that? God's making a promise and Abram is struggling openly and honestly, which I think is okay. I'm a big believer in the fact that if you have this moment with God where you can openly go, I don't know. I want to believe, but help my unbelief. And he wasn't saying, how do I know that you're good? Because this is, I think, where we get tripped up. He's not saying, I doubt your goodness. He's saying what we say. He's saying, God, what if I mess it up? What if I goof up? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I marry the wrong person? What if I take the wrong job? What if I move to the wrong state? What if I zig when I'm supposed to zag? And he's having this moment of fear that says, God, I know that you're good, but you got to know I'm not. I can't see tomorrow. How do I know when this is all? What about this? What if I get where I'm going and when I get there, I don't like it? But he's having this open moment of doubt. And it's not a doubt that says, I don't want you what you want, God. He's having this open, honest conversation with God where he goes, I want that, but how can I be sure that I won't mess it up? I'm not doubting you, I'm doubting me. And I think that's actually how we justify most doubt. I don't think we would ever openly doubt God, but we can justify our doubt by kind of piling on ourselves. It's an important distinction. My grandmother, actually, she passed away last year. What's crazy about my grandma is that she was like the most Christian woman that I've ever known. Just like she loved Jesus, she loved the Bible, and maybe she didn't understand it, maybe the way that we even would understand it now. But she was a pastor's wife. She was a children's church director. She was great. She was awesome, and she lived her whole life living for Jesus. And when she got sick, and it seemed like it was kind of obvious that it was going that direction, I remember I was so surprised by it, but I remember her saying, what if I don't get in? How can I know? How can I know for sure that where I'm going is where I want to be? And it's that moment, it's this moment that Abram's having with God, how do I know that I'll get there? What assurance do I have? How can I have peace today unless I have assurance about tomorrow? How can I be happy today unless I know more about tomorrow? I can't have peace today unless I have tomorrow settled. And we're in this series about anger, and we know that anger is a secondary emotion. It's fear, frustration, and hurt. You can't even get angry unless you've first felt fear, frustration, or hurt. And so we are these prime candidates to be angry all the time when we're afraid. When we live in this fear about tomorrow, we're prime candidates to just be subsurface angry. And not lashing out. I'm not saying that because I don't think everybody's lash out angry, but I think we're prime candidates for a moment of blow up anger because deep down we have not settled on the confidence of what about tomorrow? What about tomorrow? And if we're in fear, if we're dealing with fear, which I think to some degree we all deal with fear. Fear is always kind of present. Then it's not freedom. God's desire is freedom, and the fear is the thing that we can point to and go, I feel like I would be free. I would feel free if not for fear. I feel like for a lot of people, it is we could feel more free if we didn't feel the fear. Basically what I'm saying, all that to boil down, is that Abram was kind of a mess. Verse 9, it says, so the Lord said to him, Because he's going, how do I know? How do I know? He's just kind of running around, panicking. And God's like, I'm going to do something good in your life. And Abram's like, God's like, okay, just hang on a second. Verse 9. So the Lord said, bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Now, this is going to sound really weird to us. I'm going to explain to you what we're seeing. Abram would not have been confused by this. This was something that people did amongst themselves. So God is arranging a contract. He's going to arrange a contract. So the minute God starts saying these things, Abram would have been put off by it. He would have understood what's happening. I just want to tell you that so that when you read it and it's kind of this like, moment, Abram wasn't having that. Verse 10, Abram brought all these things to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite of each other. So he's basically making a corridor out of a sacrifice. He sacrifices these animals, and we're like, ugh. Abram, this was Old Testament stuff, is a weird place. Arranges sort of a corridor. And he did not, verse 11, then the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. So God was saying this. He was saying, arrange this in a certain way. Now, if you're like me and you're reading that and you're like, where is this going? This was something that people would do amongst themselves. This wasn't even necessarily a God thing. This was something that people would do when they had this big moment where they were both kind of trusting each other to hold up to a bargain, the contract, so to speak. In 2019, we would call this a contract, that we don't loan money without a contract. We don't make big agreements unless there's a contract. And how many signatures does a contract have on it? 2. You got to have both sides represented in this legal document. And so what God is saying is draw up this legal document, because what they would do is that people would lay this out as a demonstration and they would walk through it together. They would walk through it together and they would say, may we be like the animals represented here if we don't hold up to our end of the bargain. It was a visceral, visual reminder that says, as bad as this is, may we be like these animals if we do not do what we have said that we're going to do. So when God says to lay it out, it's in response to Abram. How do I know? How do I know? God says, write up a contract. And Abram's like, done. So Abram sets out this contract and he's waiting on God. He's waiting on God to the point that it says that the birds of the air come and he's like, no, God, we're about to make an agreement. I'm about to have a contract. I'm about to sign a contract with God. Don't mess it up. So it says, proof of this, Jeremiah 34:18 references this. It says that if you want to look it up, Jeremiah 34:18, the calf that they cut into and then walked between its pieces. It's weird as it is, it's familiar in the day. Now, if God were to tell you this, I have a job, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this job. I have this relationship, I'm not sure if it's the right relationship. I'm in this situation, but I don't know if I'm going the right direction. Ultimately, we are asking for assurance. We want to know that this roller coaster that we're riding leads to somewhere good. If we know that the roller coaster of life that we're on leads to somewhere good, we can have peace, right? What robs us of peace is, what if we do all this and it goes to somewhere we don't want to go? What if I survive all this hardship and all these hard times, and at the end of the day, I've made a wrong decision, I've made a wrong choice? Imagine the stress that comes with, what if I do it wrong? So God and Abram are going to make a contract. It would have been easy for Abram to think, if God signs it, how do I know you're going to come through? God says, write up the contract. Now, again, I want to go back. If it's a legal document, if it's a legal procedure, there needs to be 2 signatures. There needs to be 2 people that sign it. So Abram's waiting, and it seems like a good thing because God's making a promise, but if you go back again, then the problem is that we really never doubted God anyway. We didn't doubt that God was going to be the problem. We doubted we're going to be the problem. We still do this when we say this. How many people do you know that have said this? God, how many times have you heard, God, if you will just let me pass this test. I know I haven't studied the way I should have. I'm just going back to my college days for a second. I know that I haven't studied like I should have. And I'm sorry for that. I really am. I swear, if you let me pass this test, then what I will do is, and you usually go to whatever sort of failure you're sort of dealing with in the moment. Let me tell you mine. Lord, I promise if you'll just help me this one time, I will stop getting blackout drunk. If you will, then I will, please. I'm not bragging on it. I'm just giving you guys insight into my college years. Don't judge me. But my point is this, is that it's a 2-way contract. We're going to drop a contract, God, and I'll sign it. I'll sign it if you'll sign it. Just help me, please. Just please help me. Verse 17. It says, when the sun had set and darkness had fallen. So he's waited and he's waited. He's waited on God. He's waiting on God. It says a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared. Now I know, listen, if you're not a church person, I know this could seem really weird, but everything in the Old Testament was symbolic. If you're living in a time that was all symbolic, this wouldn't have seemed as weird. We live in a time where, because of the revelation of Jesus, we see things more at a spiritual level. It's almost like it's already all been revealed. We have the word that we can go back to. But in this day, the word was still being revealed. So God would reveal himself through symbols that would make sense later. Everything was this symbol of Jesus that was coming. Everything that God was doing was setting the stage for Jesus to come and do what he did. And so there is a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch. It's this representation of God. It says that God shows up. Finally that night, God shows up and the contract is written. He's ready. Abram's there. God shows up, says, you have the contract. He says, I've got it. He says, it's right here. It says, and he passed between the pieces. So God signs it. God signs the agreement that says, I am pledging to you, may I be like the pieces represented here if I do not come through on your behalf. He's all in. He's also saying, and may I, like these animals, may I be cursed if I do not come through for you. Now, the part-time semi-professional lawyer in me says the natural progression, you're probably ahead of me already on this, the natural progression would be God signs it, and then you would think that what God would say is, okay, Abram, your turn. You walk through it and you commit that you'll do your part. I'll walk through it and I'll do my part. You walk through it, you do your part. Verse 18. And on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants, I will give this land. There's something missing. If you're following along in this story in Genesis 15, there's something missing. Abram never signed it. Abram never signed it and God never asked him to. And that's an important function of what we're learning, because we go, well, okay, if it's an agreement between God and people, shouldn't Abram have had to sign it? If we are bargaining with God, wouldn't that be our big bargaining chip? Okay, God, if you'll do your part, I'll do my part. I'll do my part, you do your part. Let's make an agreement. Let's make a deal. That's how we interact with God. And God's going, we're not equals. What would your word mean to God anyway? I don't know about you guys. I've broken literally almost every promise I've ever made to God. To the point that I can't make promises anymore, because it seems like every time I'm really desperate and I make a promise to God, I somehow mess it up. If you would say that that's where you are, if you would say that in your relationship with God, there's this feeling that God's mad at you for not doing your part. If you would say that there's a concern that what if God's mad at me? What if I've messed up too many times? What if I have dropped the ball too many? What if my future is now destroyed because of decisions that I have made? This story should be life-changing in this reason. This is the concrete footing. Abraham didn't walk through it because God didn't require it, and we have to understand why. We have to understand why God would say, write up a contract and I will sign both signatures. I want to go back and make sure that we understand what this is saying. It says, write up a contract and I will sign both signatures. That I will be your blessing. And if you fail, I will be cursed for it. This is a game changer for people who carry this burden of what if I mess it up. God is telling Abram's like, how do I know? How do I know I won't mess it up? How do I know? What if this? What if that? What if that? What if this? And God's going, hey, I'll sign both signatures. I'll sign my part and then I'll sign your part too. That means it wasn't an agreement between God and Abram. It was an agreement that God was making with God. Abram can't break a promise that he didn't make. God said, I'm not depending on you to do your part. I'm depending on myself to do both parts. And if you fail, I will be cursed for it. So you don't have a mutual agreement with God. We don't have a mutual agreement where God does good things for us if we do good things for God. It's not how it was designed. That's not the design. It's no good. None of us would live up to it. That was the problem. That's what Jesus was saying, is if it's a mutual contract between me and man, then we're already toast because man screws everything up. He didn't break a promise because he didn't make a promise. And the reason that Abram didn't make a promise to God is God didn't ask him to. So, in all the areas where life is stressful, and I think to some degree we all carry a certain level of stress. Everybody's got, if you talk to people, then what you find is that everybody carries a certain level of stress. And almost always, if you boil it down, what you find at the bottom of whatever stresses you out, if I were to ask you, make a list, 1, 2, 3, what are your stresses? What you're going to find is that there's a first layer of bedrock that says, I'm stressed about finances, I'm stressed about my job, I'm stressed about my family, I'm stressed about my future. And that would be like the first stopping point in the source of our stress. But what we actually, if we go past that, well, I'm scared I won't have enough money. Why? Well, I'm scared I won't be able to pay my bills. Well, why? Well, if I don't pay my bills, then why? And what you find is if you continue to follow the thread or the vein of fear in our lives, well, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of this. What we're afraid of is that we won't be loved. All of the fear that we experience as people goes back to the idea of what if I mess it up and I become unlovable? That I'm not loved because of my own actions, that I'm alone, that I have no acceptance or approval from the people that I love. How do I know that I can take care of myself if nobody else will? See, we wouldn't be so independent-minded if we had a group of people that we knew we were loved and approved and accepted by. If we knew that the people that were around us were always going to be there and love us and approve of us. If we knew that we were always going to be loved and provided for, then the stresses that we have right now wouldn't make as much sense. But we don't ask all those questions. We generally just live a life of stress. We're just stressed. We're just fearful. Why? Because we can't see tomorrow. And if we can't see tomorrow, we can't manufacture the results. And if we can't manufacture the results, how do I know that what I'm going to get is good? And we follow it and we stress and we work and we isolate. We isolate from people. We can't afford to invest in relationships. We're too busy trying to fix tomorrow. I can't afford to be committed to God. How do I know? How do I know that I'm going to be happy when I get there? And you boil it all down, and what we have this fear of is that we're going to be alone and unloved. That's what Abram was saying. God, how do I know that when tomorrow gets here, you'll still love me? What if I've messed that up? What if tomorrow gets here and you're ashamed of me? What if tomorrow gets here and you no longer feel this way about me? What if somewhere between right now and in my future, things change because I've become something different? I've become this unlovable thing, and God is saying, I signed both sides of that contract. And even if you were to destroy everything that I've given you in your life, I'm willing to be cut to pieces to redeem you back to myself. That's what the Bible is trying to spell out over the course of Genesis to Revelation and everywhere in between, is that God is saying it's a two-way contract between God and God. It's not dependent on you. It's not a contract or an agreement that he makes with you. You are literally just given the benefits. It says that when you obey, I'll bless you, and when you disobey, I'll curse myself on your behalf. There is no, logically, if that's true, if the word is true, then what that means is fear can't logically, think of this, fear can't logically come from doubting ourselves, because it's not an agreement between God and ourselves. We cannot logically be afraid that we will mess up the contract. It comes from doubting the root of God's love and commitment to us. I'm going to say it again, and I'll probably say it 1,000 more times before we're done. That the stem of fear in our lives that turns into stress is this fear of abandonment, that God maybe won't love us, that God maybe won't hold to his commitment to us. That actually doubt and fear doesn't stem from our fear of our performance. It actually comes down to the fact that we are afraid that God won't be who he said he would be. And if we can't trust that God is going to do his part, then how do we guarantee that we do our part well enough that we're protected and that we're provided for in case God doesn't hold up? 1 John 4:18 says this. It says there is no fear in love. This is going to sound so basic. This is going to sound just so simplistic. I mean, we're going to take a trip to Sunday school for a moment, but everything that causes stress in our life, when you root it down, it comes from fear, and fear comes from a doubt of who God truly is. This belief that maybe God won't love us if we mess it up. Actually, that's an indictment on God's character. God goes, I've signed the contract myself, and I didn't ask you to sign it. That's what Genesis 15 is about. And we go, yeah, but what if you don't mean that? And God is saying that the solution to the stress and to the anger and to the frustration and to the hurt, the power that we give others because others might affect our future. What if they mess us up? What if they derail us? What if that person takes something that I can't get back? What if somebody takes something from me that I need in the future? And all this craziness, that it can all be cured. It can all be treated. The prescription from God to us about our fear and our stress and our self-preservation and our anger is that we deep down accept the love of Jesus. It's almost too simple. It's almost too easy to go that the solution is to believe that I am loved, irrevocably loved by God. I know that if it's me, it would be easy to go, that sounds too simple. I know that God loves me, but I know God loves me, but, if there's still fear, if there's still stress, if there's still anxiety, then that means there is more to God's love to discover than we have found yet. And none of us are there completely. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. Why? Because fear has to do with punishment. Fear has to do with punishment. And isn't that what we're saying? Is that we deep down feel like we're owed punishment. Based on our part of the contract, we don't feel like we really deserve God's love. We haven't really earned God's love. It's what drives the striving, this sense of striving and earning and deserving and following the rules and legalism and religion and all of these things it says. But when you accept that God loves you, it drives out this fear of punishment. That we accept that when Jesus said, I'll take your punishment, that we believe him at his word, that that's his desire. Listen, it doesn't matter what you want, it sort of doesn't matter what you want, because what he wanted is to not punish you, but to love you. And it's a contract he made with himself, and actually he took on the punishment himself. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Don't you see that in the story of Jesus? Don't you see God telling the story of Jesus to Abram? Abram didn't understand it. Abram couldn't have grasped it and go, oh, I get it now. This is like Jesus. He said, may I be like this sacrifice before I turn my back on you. And then he signed both signatures. This is a healing concept. It's a healing concept for me. I know that in my life, here's what it's done. It's allowed me to forgive people and mean it. I'm not forgiving somebody like, see God? I forgave him. Look at me go. I'm not loving people with an agenda. Have you ever had anybody that loved you but with an agenda? You just kind of, doesn't really, you kind of just feel it. Maybe you can't put your finger on it, but if somebody loves you because they want something from you, you're like, something's going on here. Are you trying to invite me to some weird church thing that you're doing? I'm not coming to your weird little church. It allows you to love fully and completely and forgive. And now all of a sudden, I'm not expecting anything back. I know that I didn't sign the contract. God did, and he gave it to me. That means this. I can now love God. I don't think that without the concept of Genesis 15, I was able to fully love God, because in the back of my mind, there's this fear of punishment. There's always this fear of punishment. What if I do it wrong? What if I mess it up? What if my actions align me to these terrible things? And how do you love a God that's always looking to punish you? If love drives out fear, if fear and love cannot perfectly exist together, how can I say that I love a God that I'm constantly afraid of? When I think, I know that I didn't do my part. That when this contract is played out, when there's this demonstration of this contract, when the rubber meets the road and it's all laid out, I realize I am lacking on my part. Then what it does is it's this fear that in that day, God will not love me. It's the thing that wasn't healed in my grandmother until the day she got to heaven. I know she walked in and went, oh. It's sweet to think that someday we'll see it. Someday we'll experience God going, no, I signed both sides of that contract. That was a promise that I made to myself. I didn't make you a promise because I knew you would break it. I made a promise to myself, and it's allowed me to love God in a way that has just sort of dissipated my anger. I can't stay mad because fear is just sort of disappearing out of my life. Fear is a word that when I recognize it, I'm beginning to move away from it. I'm not afraid of punishment. I'm not loving God to impress God, and that's a giant difference. I'm not loving God so as to impress him, because if you're still trying to impress God, you're still afraid that God's going to punish you. If you're in this place of like always trying to impress God, oh, look, God, I'm giving. Oh, look, God, I'm doing. Oh, look at me, God. Am I enough now? Have I fulfilled my part of the contract yet? Have I done enough so that my signature matters? And God is saying, I did all of that. You don't have to live in this fear of punishment. The punishment is done, that in Jesus we can love God as though the contract is completely fulfilled, because through Jesus it is. And as I begin to love God without this fear of punishment, it opens the door and it allows me to begin to love people in a way that they can feel. Not because I have an agenda. I can love people if they never change. I can love people if they don't do anything different. I can forgive people and mean it. I can love people and mean it. And we begin to reflect a God of love instead of a God of judgment and anger. And every time I run into those stress points, which we will, which you will, what I can get, wait a minute. In those moments of stress, I can go down and go, wait a minute, this contract has already been signed. God has committed to do better on my behalf, not because I signed it, but because he signed both sides of it. Let's pray. Lord, from now, probably literally until heaven's gates, this is going to be a process of learning to believe what we now know to be true. God, that you didn't put a contract in front of us and go, if you'll live up to it, then so will I. God, that your word demonstrates and shows us that your word says that I will make a commitment to people, I will make a covenant with man, and I will accept the curse if they don't live up to it. That God, your name was both names on the signature. God, let my life, let our life, let the life of what you're doing in this community reflect that. That God, through Jesus, we're alleviated from punishment. We're alleviated from shame. We're alleviated from guilt. That everything that causes us stress or fear or anger, that God, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense when you dig down deep enough, God. That the anger that's pointed at people should be changed into an anger that's pointed to their behalf, loving them, commitment to them, loyalty to them, all the things, God, that we see demonstrated from you to us. God, let us see you more clearly. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.